This is meant to be a two-part discussion, but I've got actually both parts up here on stage. And I think I'm missing something. Who am I missing? Ryan James. Ryan James. Huh? Ryan James. All right, cool. Anyways, so my name is Brian Ring. My company is Ring Digital. I'm helping all kinds of companies get into the streaming game, and so I'm helping them with marketing and business development. I have a lot of resources available at my website on consumer surveys and behavior, new technology. So if you're interested in that, I'll make one call out, ringdigital.tv/futureoftv. That won't be the only URL that we talk about, but that's my URL. And so then from that point, I'll come here and I'll let my guests introduce themselves, starting with Greg here on my far right, and talk a little bit about who you are and what you do, and that'll be good enough to start.
I'm Greg Gimignani. I'm an attorney with a firm called Dickinson Wright, located in Las Vegas. I practice primarily gaming and IP law. In addition, I'm a law school professor at the Nevada School of Law, and I'm a faculty member over at the International Center for Gaming Regulation, teaching sports wagering and gaming law topics to regulators around the world. Prior to going to law school, I was a systems engineer and a systems architect with a company called EDS. So we did a lot of early work in IP-based large systems back in the 90s and late 80s. So I'm dating myself.
Awesome. And next to you, we have Steve Heffernan. Should be on.
Yeah. Hey, Steve Heffernan. Let's see. I created a video player called Video.js. It's an open source player on the web. Also co-founder of a company called Mux. We do video performance monitoring. So hook into your video player and see how well you're streaming, and also have a live streaming API. So helping a handful of companies right now attack this problem of low latency streaming. And so it can kind of speak to the technologies underlying that, the costs that are involved, and scaling it all up.
Rich Robinson, SVP of Digital for the World Surf League. So I'm one of those users, one of those people trying to figure that out for our sport. Do all software development for the league, from the scoring systems to the broadcast tools and consumer-facing products.
I'll run over here and give you a mic.
Scott Sonnenberg, I'm the head of global partnerships for the LA Clippers. I oversee advertising sales, sponsor integrations, promotions, signage, digital, social, any corporate tie-in with the LA Clippers. Those are deals that myself or someone on my team will negotiate, and then we go about and executing those deals and any sponsor integrations that we have with products like Court Vision, which we'll be talking about.
Hi, I'm Felix Lahaye. I'm the founder of United Esports. We are a 360 media and marketing company specializing in esports and competitive gaming. Overall, our clients are a mix of gaming clients who say, okay, you guys know marketing media, please do stuff for us. And half of them are companies, my favorite type of clients, that say, we heard about this esports thing, can we do something? And we say, yes, you can do a lot of things. And we make sure that happens. So that's an overview of who we are.
Darcy Lorenz, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Torque Esports. We're a holding company for 11 different properties, ranging from Eden Games, who makes games, to Stream Hatchet, who does business intelligence, and UMG Gaming, who does a lot of streaming. So we'll talk about how, especially with them today, in the topic of sponsorship in games.
Awesome. All right, great start. I'm going to turn this off because it's in your eyes, which is not cool. And then let's spread out and get a little more comfortable. So we'll maintain one structural element, which is betting, be the first part of the conversation for sure here. We do have a great resource, I have to say. And what's fascinating too, Rich from the World Surf League has also been exploring in some ways, and I'm sure we have other guests here that have touched in some ways this world of betting. So I want to start off with Greg and just help us understand what's happening right now, in the sense that we have legalized sports betting, but it is number one, a state-by-state effort. There are a lot of regulations around how you do that. And so just to tee it up, a little bit different here, but you're a professor, so I think you'll do it. Like, what's the sports betting 101 for the folks in the audience that want to jump into this space?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is everybody's got sports wagering wherever they're at. Just most people are in jurisdictions where sports wagering is illegal, so you're betting with illegal operators. In the United States, sports wagering for a long time was illegal everywhere except for Nevada because of a law passed in '92 that prohibited sports wagering from expanding at that point in time. That law was deemed unconstitutional in May of 2018. Since then, I think 14 states have authorized and begun to allow legal and regulated sports wagering. Several other states are looking at it. I think we'll see a few more. I think that initial gold rush is probably going to net us right around 20 to 25 when we're done. But it's going to be different in each jurisdiction. I mean, some jurisdictions are doing it like Nevada, where you have commercial operators. Others have it where the lottery's doing it. In some states, it's a mix. But under federal law, it has to be an intra-state activity because of a 1961 law that is still on the books. So a lot of technologies that are great for everybody else are unavailable to sportsbook operators.
And let me
Yeah.
fire off a couple of quick questions. This is like
Fire away.
lightning- Yeah. Sure. Okay.
On the recorder.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's the first time I've been told I need a mic.
Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. No, all good. So let me give you some lightning round just to try
Sure.
to get us all up to speed. So pari-mutuel versus booked wagering.
Yeah, those are just two different forms of wagering. So book wagering is where you have a handicapper that's creating lines and odds. For those of you that bet football or NFL, you see that a lot. You know, it's still the number one type of betting in the United States. Players like it. When you make your bet, you know what it is. You're betting 110 to win 100 usually. So, for example, I think San Francisco and Green Bay are playing on Sunday night. I think San Francisco's like a 2.5-point favorite. It's easy to understand. When you make your bet, you know what you're getting back. Pari-mutuel wagering is horse race wagering. You know, it's if you ever bet on horses, pari-mutuel, you throw all your money into a pool, track takes a cutout, or what's called a takeout, and the remaining part of the pool goes to whoever has a winning ticket, divided based upon how much they bet into that pool. So you don't know what your odds are until the race goes off. In Nevada, we do have pari-mutuel wagering on sports. We also have booked wagering or hand-booked wagering on sports. Hand-booked wagering's far more popular than pari-mutuel. Pari-mutuel just has not been accepted by the market in the United States. U.S. bettors don't like it. Some European jurisdictions like it, but it just hasn't taken off in the U.S.
Okay. And so then we also talked really briefly, again, a lightning round type of question for you is that auditable data is key. And what I noted is that one of the things I've seen happening, I believe, is a lot of the leagues have taken ownership of their data sets. And I said something to the effect of, oh, they're going to sell this data and it's going to help to monetize. And you said, if you're comfortable saying this again, is that you felt that there was some danger, and I want you to describe that danger in a league getting a little too close to the betting world.
Yeah, I think data will be something leagues sell, clearly. I think third parties are also going to sell it. Auditable data is going to create more things that you can bet on. So, for example, going back to the NFL example again, just because football's so easy to understand, I think most people understand NFL, right? We had an operator that was taking what were called proposition wagers in game. Will the kicker make this next kick or not? Now, from a Nevada standpoint, we're highly regulated. All the data has to be auditable. So how do you know that that's the kick that the bettor's betting on in the event you have a dispute after the fact? So you need good data to go back to make sure that bets are being resolved properly, taxes are being resolved properly, and things like that. And up until very, very recently, we just don't have good data, that good of data, that's reliable and independently verifiable. I think leagues and other organizations like Amazon are going to start providing that data. Where it gets a little messy is when leagues want to take a cut of the wagering. I think at that point, first of all, there's not that much money in sports betting. Yeah, there's not that much money in sports betting.
Which I'm gonna actually ask you to modify that a bit.
Yes.
Profit.
Yeah, there's not that much money you make in sports wagering as the book operator. In Nevada, and by the way, you mentioned the URLs. If you want to see the source data for the things I'm talking about, I've got links on my own website, just gamingmaterials.com. Look at special presentations. There's a link to Nevada's data since 1984. Since 1984, sports wagering generally averages around a 5.5% hold. So we talk about things like hold and handle. Handle's the amount of money people bet. Hold is what the sports books keep. and they're only keeping about 5.5% of that, and then out of that, you got to take your taxes, federal and state. You take out all the labor that's involved, all of the data feeds that are involved, all the regulatory overhead, and it's not a real high margin business.
So then a quick follow-up to that is, okay, so why is everyone talking about making so much money, right? So one thing is something I said is data. So that's fine. They'll make a little money off the data. That's great. What else?
Yeah, content. Content is going to be king. I mean, leagues are still going to profit from sports betting, even if they're not getting a cut of the wagers. I think they're going to profit because viewership's going to go way up. You know, again, back to the NFL example, Miami and the Redskins are playing on a rainy Thursday night. You know, unless you have a relative that's on the team, do you watch it? But if you have a little money on it, you probably will. But in addition to that, you're going to see radio shows, streaming podcasts, audio podcasts, things people sign up for, data tools that people sign up for that want to get to know more about the events and betting on it. The real money in sports wagering's around it. It's in the content and in the things that it pushes. In Nevada, our casinos see sports wagering and sports books as an amenity that pays for itself, but it's not a moneymaker.
Awesome. Very good. All right, we're going to shift to Rich Robinson, who had senior executives from on high. There's sports betting in Australia, and he comes to you and says, hey, what are we going to do? And I guess that's also a segue for you to sort of get into the viewer engagement and what you've done for the Freshwater Pro, et cetera.
Sure. So yeah. So we so in Australia they've been betting on surfing for a long time. So obviously we're a subjective sport, so there's some we have to be very careful. We don't tend to get too close to the subject matter, but we obviously recognize the value in the narrative, right, in the talking points. Fantasy obviously winds up being kind of the prop in the middle there, the kind of stand-in for what betting might represent to us. And I mean, I guess it's interesting because when we look at our approach to fantasy, we're operating on understandings, debates on whether we're trying to attach value to converting the surf fan into being a fantasy player, or also trying to expose fantasy players in general to surfing. And I think that might even kind of apply to some of the promises assigned to the lift seen in betting. I think if we could just kind of snap our fingers and betting's now available in all the standard markets for surfing, that we'd see a bunch of people throw money behind it. I assume it's probably a larger transition of being able to kind of seed awareness of the opportunity and seed exposure to what it feels like to be setting up prop bets as one of our heats is going on in the water. But all the mechanisms should still be there. I mean, you have obviously the variability of the ocean backing your potential prop bet, which makes it that much more interesting, I think. But obviously, as a league, we have to be very careful about making sure that we're not, opening up the subjectivity to that kind of environment. So,
and then so let's segue a little bit. So
Sure.
First of all, I think it's super fascinating. How many people know about what is it called? The surf park?
It's called the Surf Ranch.
Kelly Slater, right?
Yeah.
Major surfer, and he's created an artificial wave.
So
pool.
it's a man-made wave system in a place called Lemoore, California. It's about 20 minutes outside of Fresno. It's 7 football fields long. It's kind of this repurposed lake out there, and they've built a man-made wave system that generates about kind of 6 to 8 foot waves every 4 minutes. We've been hosting competitions there the last 2 years or so, and it's a completely different exercise for us from what we do traditionally. Obviously, the pace of the show is very different. The pace of the competition is very different. But this year, we set our sights on trying to figure out if we could introduce some element of fan participation. So that kind of cracks into some of the low latency challenges associated with it. We're producing a live broadcast at the contest site that's being distributed across our digital platforms and to all of our linear partners. We were featured on Fox. I think we were on FS1 on Saturday of that event window. And for me on the digital side, the holy grail for me is that the story being told in the broadcast that's being seen out on that linear partner platform is leveraging aspects of our digital platform that you can't decouple, right? So what we basically did was set up a scenario where tooling at the contest site was triggering calls to action on our platform that then asked fans to vote on each wave every 4 minutes. we would then run average on all the fan votes and get that data point back into our production truck and on air. The turnaround time had to be within a couple of seconds because the fill time between waves was that moment of time where the commentators could then kind of debate the various goings on while they're waiting for the judges to render their score. And the win was really, getting the broadcast team to really embrace it as a value add to their storytelling. But it did open up a number of interesting technical challenges on the video streaming side. Not only latency, but also being able to marry up a data stream with it to make sure that those calls to action weren't spoiling an outcome or weren't potentially creating a game that didn't effectively work to where to the flow of the broadcast team themselves. So yeah, it was interesting.
So, and let's just a quick follow-up on that is this broader question of like interactivity, and it's like you mentioned, this fantasy, right? So there's this sports betting energy that's sort of also lending itself to these games and gamifications and predict the play, sort of an in-between zone. And we talked a little about this, and having been in this space for a long time, it's like, well, there's only, 5% of the population that's going to do this, or 10%. We've talked about this, like you go to a basketball game, it's a little awkward to have people pulling out their phones, et cetera. And I think, number one, that's going to rise. I think doing a web app instead of an app download is a key part of that. But I think the most important part is what we had just talked about in the speaker room, that it's not about how many people participated necessarily. I mean, of course, it would be great to have more people participate, but rather the fact that that participation is actually affecting the programming, the content. In the content, people are sort of, I guess, judges, or you take it from there. Like, how is that fan engagement then integrated into the broadcast? And basically, everybody's enjoying that.
Yeah, I mean, voting on the waves isn't the only point of interaction. We've experimented with live chat, a lot of other things that people tend to kind of bring up as interesting ideas, ways that we could advance our product offering. And in a lot of those cases, those early tests do indicate that it's a similar level of pickup across the board, regardless of the feature, that it's single-digit percentage points. It winds up being a self-selecting audience that was likely already going to be that highly engaged. They're the same people that probably have a private chat group with their friends debating it while the broadcast is going on, right? They're creating their own opportunities on their own. And there's absolutely some value in being able to host that on our own platform, right? Just from a data perspective and what it gives us in insights. But the idea that all of a sudden some major percentage of the audience is all going to be performing that same action, I think is not necessarily true. I will say once those folks that represent the kind of the core of our core have an ability to add value to the broadcast itself, and the rest of the audience is able to see that value, I do anticipate it growing pretty significantly. But I think there's probably a safe zone estimate of kind of low double digits participation on any one feature that would be deemed success. At the end of the day, though, it's giving the broadcast team another tool to be able to evaluate their success. I can't tell you how many times we end a heat and then you have a little bit of review, and it's what was the measurement for success? Well, it was actually kind of errors committed in the truck or other things tied to broadcast function and not necessarily the narrative itself. And I think this gives us that additional layer of data to say that we moved the needle in a substantive way from a narrative perspective.
Okay, so awesome. So I have another good segue. This one's for you, Steve. So I feel I'm a big fan, aren't we all, of Steve Jobs, right? And I feel one of his geniuses was that he wouldn't roll stuff out until it was really ready for prime time. And I mention that because I've been involved in this interactive space. I love it. And this year, I was very excited. The NBA decided during the All-Star break that they were going to do some really fun two-screen stuff, which is that they had a vote, an All-Star, which four players would you like to see on an ISO cam on your mobile device. So the idea is you're watching the broadcast, and a player is going to be focused on the entire time on your phone. And first of all, I love any innovation, so kudos to Twitter for doing that. But what I was really interested in is this was like a classic case of low latency being absolutely necessary. And so while a lot of people talk about, the Super Bowl and the spoiling of the event or whatever, the key is like that was absolutely critical. And I noticed, so Twitter had done a great job. Most streamers now are, I guess, 30 seconds at least delayed. Most of the broadcasts are 30 seconds. And that Twitter stream, the second stream, was basically 10 seconds delayed. But what I realized when I was watching it, because I think it was, not deemed a huge success. That's just my own personal opinion, even though I congratulate Twitter and encourage the NBA to do it again next year. But the fact is, you cannot do that unless it's a perfectly synced stream. It just didn't work, right, as an experience. So that's a big, long, verby segue into where are we? There was an industry effort to get to low latency using certain methods. Now we have literally 2 weeks ago or whatever, I don't know exactly when, they published a new spec. That Apple basically has come forth with a brand new spec called LLHLS. And I'm going to leave it there. So let's have Steve pick it up and talk about what's happening in the industry for low latency, where we are today, and how we get to where we need to be.
Yeah, sure. So maybe really quick, we can, for the most part today, reach low latencies, even at that scale. At the scale of a big sporting events. The problem is it's very expensive. So we look at a game like HQ Trivia, right? When they were first spinning up and getting popular, they were still streaming RTMP to every single viewer of that app. And we were doing the math on that, assuming they were using a Flash Media server or Wowza, they were spending $20,000 just on encoding for a 15-minute game. So all in, you're looking at $50,000 to $100,000 for a 15-minute segment of a game. So coming back to betting, if we're saying that there's not a lot of profit in betting, that's a lot of that profit going out the door for such a short period of video, right? So that's where this push is coming from, to use basically HTTP-based technologies as opposed to RTMP or WebRTC, which those two protocols are very expensive to scale up. HTTP is this protocol that CDNs have been optimizing for 20 years now. It's using commodity hardware on the edge, and it's 10 times more expensive to stream on one of these other protocols than it is scaling up HTTP. So, so where we're at is we have a couple of different protocol, methods of using, so I'm sure you're familiar with HLS and Dash and those kind of options that you have for doing this adaptive streaming. Well, those two platforms, I guess you might say, are both kind of exploring how they can get their mechanisms down to lower latency. And there's been one in process for over a year now on the Dash side and bleeding into the HLS space. And then, as Brian mentioned, it was a couple months ago, Apple came out with their own version, which is actually completely different from what the community was doing. So maybe quickly to speak to those options. The first one, the Dash option, is basically using a technology that allows the player to request the next part of video before it's even created. So you're saying, give me the next segment of video, and then it's kind of hanging, and then as the video is coming in, the bytes are coming in, the player is able to shove it into the player as the bytes are streaming. The Apple approach is using a newer technology with HTTP, so HTTP2 has a technology called push in it, and this is mainly used for, so if you think you have an HTML page, and that HTML page has CSS files and JavaScript files attached to it, what this mechanism does is allows the server to say, oh, you're requesting this HTML page, I'm also going to give you these other things as well. And so what we're using this in video, or what Apple is proposing to use in video, is to say okay, well, you're asking for this manifest, but I'm also going to give you the next segment of video in that. So it's kind of a different approach to do the same thing, getting the files from the server to the client without more communication happening and these pauses in between. So
Good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Okay.
This is pretty tough. I asked somebody yesterday about the HTTP push 2 thing, and he was pretty technical, and I'm pretty technical, and we had a pretty tough time. So I'll go now 50,000 feet for you. Same question. So now what's going to happen in your estimation, if you're comfortable with that? Do people now need to focus on what Apple's saying and leading and go in that direction? Or I guess if not, we have another problem that I'm quite familiar with in our business of people splitting off different workflows, and that's just going to slow everything down with what we're talking about here. Give me your high-level prognostication on that.
Yeah, so we were actually part of a forum last month meeting with Roger Pantos from Apple and Will Law from Akamai and trying to come to some consensus between these two. Long story short, there's maybe two major places where these things can overlap. One is at the CDN level, from going from the origin to the CDN edge, and the other is from the CDN edge to the player. It sounds like we're going to get alignment on the origin to the CDN edge, which for us means CDNs are going to be able to not have to build multiple ways of doing the things and essentially not have to charge us more to do things two different ways. I think from the edge to the player, which means how the manifests are created and supporting Dash plus HLS, I think we're in that world of two manifests for a long time as far as I can see. Unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. So great. By the way, I want to welcome any questions for any of the guests. So if you've got questions, write them down or raise your hand. We'll keep it informal. And yeah, very good stuff. Okay, good. Let's segue now a bit to this crew over here. And, well, I guess we'll do a quick, I think, I'll start with you, Scott. I think we'll avoid the betting for the moment. I think it would be good to sort of open up with what your role is in terms of engaging partners, what the economics look like there, and maybe a little bit about the big partnership we like to talk about, which is what Clippers Court Vision is all about, and in partnership with AWS, how this data is in increasing engagement with viewers.
Yeah, so so in my role with the Clippers, we're obviously looking for sponsor integrations within the broadcast. You've got a lot of different options to choose from when you're a partner that's looking to partner with the Clippers, whether it be through digital, social, signage, any type of platform that we create. This Court Vision platform that we created over the last few years has been quite interesting for partners to take a look at. To give you a little more in-depth look into what Court Vision is, essentially what we did is we created a product that puts control in the fans' hands on how they want to watch the broadcast. So when you sit down in front of a sporting event and you turn on your TV, you're watching whatever the broadcaster wants to show you. You're watching their camera angles, you're listening to their broadcasters, you're seeing their replays, and you are there just enjoying the broadcast in that form. Now, what we've seen is, I know especially with the younger generation, is they're not sitting in front of TVs like we used to and just flipping through channels. You may even have a large screen TV in your family room and your kids are sitting there watching their 6-inch mobile phones and watching content in that way. And so what we did is we created a product that allows you as the fan to interact with the broadcast. You choose your own camera angles. You choose replays that you want to see. You choose different platforms that you can watch it on, and we think it's an opportunity to really revolutionize the way sports are being watched. We call this product Court Vision. You open up the Clippers Court Vision app, and it's streamed through Fox Sports. There's a little bit of a delay on it, but you can choose exactly how you want to watch it, and you've got different modes to watch it in. Do you want me to get into some of those now?
Yeah, let's do it. I mean,
Okay.
I segued a little bit with my wife doesn't like the tickers on our baseball games. I mean, I love the tickers, so it's a perfect example, and I think some of the examples are fantastic. Alternative audio, right? And so yeah, I think it'd be great. Talk about those a little bit, but also I think even what you found people liked the most, or if you have that feeling of.
Sure.
What you liked the most, or around the office, what people thought was really interesting.
So when you open the Court Vision app, you can choose different modes. There's player mode. So if you're into fantasy sports and you want to get more familiar with the strengths and weaknesses of the players that are participating, when you open up player mode, you'll see shot percentages of the players underneath them being shown in augmented reality as they move around the floor. So when you've got Lou Williams open on the wing, you'll see he's got a 50% chance of making that shot. When you see one of our bigs in the corner, open for a three, maybe he's got a 20% chance. And so depending on where they are on the floor, you can see the likelihood of them making a basket. When you switch from player mode to coach's mode, you see plays being diagrammed on the court as they're happening in real time. So when you see Lou Williams pass the ball, you'll see a dotted line. When you see him cut, you'll see a squiggly line. When you see a guy dribble around around the outside, you'll see a straight line. And so you'll be able to take a step back and see exactly the play that was called as it happened in real time. Another fun mode to watch it in, I have kids, they love to watch it in mascot mode. And again, using augmented reality, as one of our players hits a three-pointer, you may see some dollar signs pop up. Or, we run a promotion with Chick-fil-A inside the stadium, and you'll see the cows behind the basket. Maybe that's a sponsor integration that we could include in our Court Vision product. Or if a player is driving to the basket, maybe you see tire streaks, and there's Toyo tires there. So there's different sponsor integrations, but the mascot mode makes it a little more entertaining for your average fan. Maybe the mascot will just pop up on the screen. And so kids love to watch that. And then you've got your standard broadcast mode. In addition to that, you've got your camera angles at the bottom. So you could choose, I want to watch it from the scoreboard. I want to watch it from the player's bench. I want to watch just the regular feed from half court. So it gives you control. And so that's what I think is different and unique about watching it through Court Vision versus just sitting in front of the broadcast, because like I've seen with my kids, they like to be able to interact. They like to have options. And this keeps them engaged instead of just sitting there with the screen, with the TV on, and either their laptop or their phone or their tablet in front of them doing something else and looking up every so often to watch the game.
And I think one of the things that I find most fascinating, you mentioned a little bit about audio commentary. Well, actually, two things. Number one, there's a company that's basically doing UGC sports broadcasts. And I think probably like 80% of all sports fans in the world at one point wanted to be a sports broadcaster, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think it's fun, this idea of like different audio commentaries in the app, which I think you do support, including multi-language, which is critical. Mm-hmm. So then I have a fun little question for you, because I had the pleasure of seeing a great game. And actually, I hadn't seen a basketball game at Staples in a long time. And there's a lot of noise. I mean, there's a lot of like music and dun, dun, dun. It's constant every side. One side of it wasn't like that when I was growing up. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, I know you have a mode which is just the sneaker squeaks, right?
Yep.
And that is that. I mean, it gets back to my original like. What are some of the favorite modes? Is that one of those modes that people? Because I imagine there's a population that they can't stand the commentators. That's not me. I love the commentators, but I bet there's a group of hardcore fans that love that mode.
Yeah.
What about that mode? Or give me another sort of fun anecdote. Like, what around the office? What's the favorite mode around the office for Court Vision?
You can certainly turn the broadcasters off altogether. If you just want to listen to the squeaks of the shoes on the floor, the ball going through the net, the bounce of the ball, you could turn everything off and just have that on. As far as what's most fun in the office, I think that mascot mode, because you never know what's going to pop up. It just adds a new dynamic to watching sports, where you'll see a mascot run through run across the screen. You'll see the fans holding up those dollar signs. You'll see when they make a three-pointer, you'll see them holding up the three-point placards. So it makes it a little more exciting, especially for the younger fan. What'll really be interesting is if sports betting comes here to California and how we could integrate that into the Court Vision product. Because, imagine sitting there watching the Court Vision and there's a prop bet that pops up that says, 5-1 odds says that Lou Williams takes the last second shot, 7-1 says the field takes it, and 9-1 says, he makes it. Place bet here. And those are things that you could click on immediately as they're happening in real time. And so if sports betting does come here, then perhaps that's something in the future for Court Vision. For the time being, it's, we've launched it. We launched it with the anticipation that this is not a Clippers product, but that other teams, other sports, other leagues will also jump on board, and we're starting to see that.
Excellent. Thank
Is there
you.
a question?
Yeah, question.
How far off is your app versus conventional? Like, how far is the delay between?
It's about 1.5 minutes now. They think they can get it down to a minute by this year. Actually, in partnership with AWS, they're helping us in that initiative. But the goal is to get it to your standard 30-second delay. But it's a little longer delay for the time being because of the the augmented reality piece and the things that are layered into it.
Excellent. So Felix,
Yes.
over to you.
Hello.
And I think so, Felix. You're our representative here of esports in the kind of, I guess that's your sweet spot, right? In terms of representing brands and esports gaming teams,
Sure.
etc.
Yeah, we we have esports in our name, like you guys do too. So I guess esports is a lot of what we do. Our clients are primarily games or brands that are getting into esports.
Right.
So both.
And we talked about this, so I want to cue it up for you, right? Is that I think
do
the
it.
conventional wisdom is that Twitch and esports, it's a highly engaged audience. The numbers are through the roof, but the number of people is relatively narrow, and the hours that they spend are quite high. Well, you can debate that.
Sure,
That's
sure.
fine. But I think what's really interesting is this idea of like, oh, so the endemic advertisers have an obvious reason to engage. Like these people
Right.
are buying video games and so forth. But I think you made the really great insights. I'll tee it up to you of like, well, even the non-endemic brands, like that's the whole point of their engagement is to become endemic to the
Absolutely.
culture.
So I don't like to use the term of endemic and non-endemic as we were
Right.
discussing, because to me there are brands that are in esports and brands that are not yet in esports. And you take an example of many brands that have not, for example, Pepsi and their G Fuel product. It's a endemic product to esports from a beverage company. And therefore, by engaging in esports, Pepsi becomes an endemic brand. So I don't particularly classify the brands as endemic or non-endemic for that reason. There are the brands that people say are endemic traditionally are the brands that relate directly to gaming. So publishers and hardware mainly. I mean, I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but mainly publisher and hardware. So publishers are the guys that make the games, hardware is the computer, the headsets, the things you can physically buy to help you play or enhance your playing experience. When we created the company, our goal was to do exclusively formerly non-endemic brands, and now actually we're all a bunch of nerds at the office, so we're happy that a lot of our campaigns are for the games themselves too. So we have a good mix, and it allows us to, and it's a different challenge, right? The publishers kind of know some things, and traditionally described as non-endemic know other things, but they really need to get in esports. So that's what we do, and yeah, we like it.
Excellent. So, and I think on the same subject, we talked about one really great execution was Bud Light.
Yeah.
Right? And talk about that in terms of the impact it had on the industry.
Sure. So Bud Light is not one of our clients. I'm not here to self-promote, but it's one of my favorite companies that are in esports because they have a very thorough legal team, and they showed that they decided to invest into esports. For us, the main challenge for the last few years, and I don't know if you saw the same, but we talked to a lot of brands, and they will be saying, oh, esports is for a bunch of kids in their basements. You can show them statistics all day long to say it's not true. Certain people will still believe esports is for kids in their basement. When you have a brand that literally has to be LDA compliant, so that's legal drinking age compliant on everything they do, and their super bottomed up legal team decides that they're going to invest in esports, it shows the rest of the advertiser at least 75, it's like 74.6 or 9, I can't remember the number for the law, but let's say at least 75% of people that watch esports are in a 21 plus audience, which is obviously very desirable from a monetary standpoint. So that's why I like them. Some of the things they did are good, some are less good, but overall, just the fact that they exist in the space makes me and my team and my colleagues very happy because it really helped us unlock a lot of sponsorships that were at a standstill.
So one quick follow-up on that, or pick another brand. We talked about this. So
Sure.
One thing about Twitch is it's a lot of chatting, and one thing about this new crew growing up, I mean, they'll chat immediately.
Absolutely.
And they'll badmouth, and if you're trying to advertise in that environment, you've got to kind of you cannot be tone deaf. You
Correct.
get pegged out immediately.
Absolutely.
And
I
you
mean,
said this is one of the things you love about it.
yeah, exactly. I mean, the term we use in the office is "hello, fellow kids." I mean, it's a meme, but the idea that brands will come and say, "Haha, I speak gamer now."
Right.
You don't. I mean, you may, but you also may not. And overall, what we try to do is to try and get our clients, especially the traditionally outside of esports brands, so our CPG clients or QSR clients, and help them, talk to that audience. So overall, esports and gaming is not an exclusive part of most fans' identity, but it is a part of it. You know, me, I work in esports. When I talk to people and someone tells me, "Oh, what is that esports thing?" I'm like, "What? It's fantastic." You know, you have an identity that's tied to the fact that you appreciate esports, and that's what our campaigns aim to do. And you're talking about the chat. It is live streaming and gaming and esports. As you say, the reaction is immediate. And like anything else, it can trickle in on the positive or the negative, either way. And usually you see almost a group mind, a hive mind effect that if the first few comments are positive, the most of the discussion is going to be positive going forward. If the first few are negative, it's going to take a negative tone. It is very rarely a balanced discussion. If you're talking about the big streams, you know, the example we say about the chats is it's like neurons firing, because you can't read all those messages. There's literally 100 a second. But if you see 100 times a positive emoji or 100 times a negative emoji, you have a feeling for how that stream is going. And that's what we really try and do. And we achieve it by not talking to the audience as if they were idiots. We understand they're smart and they understand their passions. And we try and sometimes we talk about things that have nothing to do with esports. Sometimes it's men's health. And men's health is important because a lot of the viewers are male and so on.
So, by the way, that's one of the most fascinating things I've heard in a long time. And as I reflect on my usage of Twitter, I see the same thing. You know, everybody's
Right.
afraid to step up. So it's like when the negative chat comes in, all of a sudden everyone's piling on the negative. They feel free. And then likewise on the opposite side. That's pretty fascinating. So, Darcy, over to you. And, you know, it strikes me as interesting, like, first of all, endemic in your world is worth a lot of money. It's cars and automotive. Right, so it's not like a Coke. It's like, you know, a couple $1,000 for your rims, and I think also it's a very natural integration, right? So, talk to us a little bit about what you're doing in the car racing space, how physical is meeting digital, and how you're making money and sponsorships out of it.
Sure. I'll talk in-game and out-of-game, so I'll use those terms, and hopefully it makes sense. So we actually make games that are for racing, basically, driving racing. And we did that because we needed to own the game, because all the things we're talking about in this panel, how you get product placement in a game and do things in-game that the players want to see or naturally, gravitate towards. So you do find in racing games, people are just like us. We like Ford or Ferrari or General Motors or whatever your affinity is, but nobody was tagging that. They couldn't, every other driving game out there, racing game, doesn't care. They don't do anything into game except sell great games and sell as many as they can. We took a different approach. We said everything starts in the garage. You build a car just like you do on a racetrack or at home, and so you're going to get affinity to a brand. I don't know if any of you are car people, but when I grew up, my dad gave me some wrenches and a car and said fix it, and if it runs, you get it. So I had to go and learn that way, and they don't learn that way now, but they do in our garage. So we have a garage where all the brands can be presented on inside the garage. And everything we do is physics-based, which I'll talk about in a second. But so in-game, how do you place products in the game that make sense? You learn very quickly their affinity to certain things. I can tell you in the game, we have 14 million active mobile gamers. I can tell you if they like Ford, General Motors, or Chrysler, or some other foreign brand, absolutely, because they always choose that car. And I can tell you if they like Pirelli tires or Bridgestone, because they always choose those tires. So historically, it was just level 1, 2, 3, 4 tire. Now it's Pirelli brand A, B, C, D. And we tell Pirelli instantly how many people are putting Pirelli tires on their virtual cars. So ultimately, that's in-game, product placement, advertising. It's just how the sponsor reaches that audience. And inside that game, there's typically people that can drive. So they're probably going to go and do something in their regular garage or just buy some tires someplace. So putting coupons inside of their wallet and doing things based on their behavior in the game, we're doing it constantly. It's kind of transparent. You quit the game and your wallet pops up and says, oh, here's some Pirelli tire coupon, here's an oil change, and all these things. So all these brands are going, well, wait a minute, this is what we just use the playbook of racing, by the way. This isn't new. This happened in the virtual world for the last 50 years. We're just taking the playbook and doing it now inside of a game. So that that is really, you know, how does the brand reach those people? They're passionate, they're enthusiasts for automotive, and the brands are doing the same thing, putting products in the game. We also, as you're racing, so after you've wrenched on your car and you've used all these products, you drive down the road or on a track. We hijack track graphics. So if Shell's our sponsor that week, everything on every racetrack is Shell billboards as you're driving by. On the side of the track, there's graphics. So in a very, you know, go down there, Glow Gear Club, because it's very photorealistic. So this is the in-game people are very passionate, and they're you know, interacting with the brand. The audience, who's in the millions watching these races, is the other side of the cut. So this is where the streaming comes in. So when you have these competitions going on, and you have people like Barcello or, you know, Fittipaldi or one of our, you know, our influencers is racing, a lot of people watch it. So that's not the same thing. Not playing the game. They might be the gamers themselves that are watching, but it's just other people that are interested in that particular racer, or they're interested in seeing if they're going to win because we have a lot of prizes in the game. We have a million.
The name of the game is
Gear Club's the game. The competition's called the World's Fastest Gamer, and I'll talk about how that goes. Everybody wants to race because they want to be the world's fastest gamer. So that's the ultimate goal. And the reason people watch them is because they compete constantly. We have over 1,000 events a day that are on UMG Gaming that are just happening, and people are racing. Some of them are just kids, and nobody watches them except a couple of their friends. And what, you know, if somebody comes in like Montoya, and all of a sudden he's racing, or his kid's racing, or some other popular, you know, driver, suddenly you go to 1 million viewers. Now, what's the brand activation? What's the sponsorship? We could use the same ones, but we do other things and overlays. You know, typical things like lower thirds and bugs. You know, that you see on, but these are interactive, so they actually have actions. You know, a little thing will bounce across the screen, and if you capture it, you get a coupon for an oil change. You know, a little different at home. But once we know those viewers at home, then we have the same actions. We tell them to play the game, or we show them targeted ads because we know that they're watching this Ford Mustang all the time versus the guys that are racing in the open wheel, you know, Formula One races. And so you can sort of shift the crowd around too and put sponsors over top of them. So as Brian said, you know, endemic for us is perfect because that's what we do in automotive. Well, we do with all that stuff. We own a data analytics company called Stream Hatchet. We actually produce all of that product and provide it as a service to all the other games.
and that's broadcast
Yep.
on UMG. It's not to Twitch or YouTube.
Well, no, it's on Twitch. It's on UMG. It's on the sponsor's website. It's wherever they want it to be. Problem with Twitch is they kind of try and restrict you to being only on their platform. And frankly, if we're not there, we don't care because our racing crowd will watch us wherever they are. They're not just discovering us by accident on Twitch, you know. So
I want to ask the audience a quick question, then I'll take your question. But how many people here I'm talking about whether you would prefer, whether you're more interested in the sponsor integration element of this segment or the betting element. So how many people, raise your hand if you're more interested in the, how do I do sponsor integration properly? Versus how many people are really interested in the betting? How do I get involved in betting and where? All right.
I can
roughly
talk about
50-50.
betting too.
Huh?
So this UMG Gaming, if you've ever been on it, you challenge 4 of your friends. You all put $5 in the pot, and winner takes all except for our vig that we take. So,
That's skill-based gaming.
yep,
No.
it's not outcome. It's not gambling.
Yeah.
And nobody from the outside can place a bet.
So that's it.
It's just
But
us.
so it's a good. Do you want to do a quick on that? What's the difference between skill-based and gambling?
In some states, if you're betting on skill on an event that is predominantly, sorry. In some states, if you're betting on an event, if you're a participant in an event and you're betting on it, on the outcome of the event that you're participating in, it's exempted from gaming laws as long as nobody else is making any money on it. In some states, it doesn't matter. If chance plays any role, it's going to be a gambling event. And if anybody's taking a vig, then you got a bookmaking issue potentially. So.
Making your case when a couple of mates race against each other.
It goes back to the sponsors, and we get paid through sponsorship. So ultimately, it's, you know, we're not collecting cash from this transaction. And to his point, we also, if there's a state that doesn't allow it, and your IP address shows up in that state, you don't get to do it. You know, you don't get to play.
Do you have an
So I guess-
expectation of how many people spoof their location?
Well, because we own the game, it's difficult to VPN into our servers. We don't. We own it. We own the whole ecosystem. So it's not a problem for us.
So data and telemetry is a topic I'll throw out, and I'm going to sort of do, again, kind of a lightning round for all of you. And again, if you guys have questions, now's the time. But actually, I'll throw it out first to Rich. So I think you're doing something pretty interesting. Is you've talked about how it's difficult to engage in some of these betting schemes in the sense that it's a subjective sport. So talk to us a little bit about what you're thinking in terms of how you could collect physical telemetry, sort of StatCast as the baseball. How many in the audience know what StatCast is? StatCast. No? Okay, so let me just say, AWS StatCast, if you like baseball, AWS StatCast is, I mean, it's one of the best things that's happened since like the graphical strike zone, right? So what you'll see is you'll see an outfielder just make an amazing, like fully stretched out catch. And basically what AWS has done in all its data collection is it can calculate exactly how fast that guy was running and what the probability was for that person to catch it, right? Or if you hit a home run, they calculate the distance of that ball, right? The angle, the exit velocity, and you've started to see, I remember when it was first brought out, them broadcasters were like, they were very much, what is this geeky stuff? You could see how hard it is, and I would say this because this is this show. It is very hard to get these broadcast teams involved in this type of activity. I think you guys have done a brilliant job. You told me the story, Rich, about how you got these broadcast teams involved. But just a kind of a broad segue there to how you're going about solving that problem of subjectivity and what kinds of telemetry and machine vision you're thinking about using and how that's gone and how it's where it needs to go next in order to work.
Yeah, so we've explored different ways to bring measurement and kind of deep stats to our broadcasts for a number of years now. We've met with a lot of the teams that do work for the different stick and ball sports that have the luxury of a fixed in place stadium. That limitation in our space ends up being a pretty big blocker, that we don't have certainty that we can set up fiducial markers and create an established field to measure against. So in our case, we then look at ways that we can potentially introduce instrumentation into the athlete's environment. That becomes a challenge because if your career is on the line, you're in the middle of competition, the last thing you want to do is have literally even an ounce of additional weight on your board. It's a no-go. So we have to find ways to kind of pass the athlete test, to collect useful information. We have been experimenting a lot with some machine learning, some machine vision experiments that I think are pretty promising. But similarly, it's about training models on a per location basis. So it really, is us taking our tour stops one at a time and finding ways to kind of solve for each of those problems. But the hands-free nature, hands-off nature of it from the field of play is really promising. As more of our production moves off the beach and gets into more cloud-based environments, it becomes that much easier. It's been
So
interesting.
that's awesome, and I think it's also a good segue for you in terms of what you're doing to collect this data on the court, and then also a little segue for you about, because you had mentioned that you're looking at the way this works with other sports. Sports, by the way, if you don't know, but like it's a very individual, sport by sport exercise. The cadence, the emotion, the fandom, it's different sport by sport. So take that one in terms of how are you doing the telemetry of this data on the court, maybe a little bit about your partner on that, and then also as you think about the other sports and how the dynamics are different from basketball to some other sport, where you see that going next.
Yeah, so there's actually a couple of partnerships that we had in launching the Core Vision. The first is Second Spectrum. Second Spectrum actually built the platform alongside Steve Ballmer, that was an investor in it, and built this product. And then it was a matter of, all right, what other types of partners do we need to work with in order to help capture the data and analyze it? And right at the top of the list was AWS. So what you have in all 29 arenas throughout the NBA is you've got cameras installed in the rafters of each arena, and those cameras are capturing data. That data is then sent through the AWS channels, and I'm certainly not the technical expert in this, but it's then analyzed by AWS and then shared through the Court Vision product, and that's where you see the shot percentages pop up depending on where the players are on the floor or the plays being diagrammed based on player movements. Previously, all of this data was being captured by basketball operations, and they were using it for scouting reports. And when Steve Ballmer bought the Clippers about 5 years ago, he said, "Well, how do we give this to our fans?" how do we allow them to have access to this? And that's how Court Vision was launched. But it takes strategic partners like an AWS that helps us to analyze the data and then share it in a way that our fans can understand.
And you mentioned like a second spectrum at least, and you can voice it, but like they are looking at different sports.
Oh,
What's your
right.
what's your take on what's the next? I mean, obviously, well, I guess baseball really they've done a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm.
So they're I'll kind of set that aside. But between soccer and hockey and football, what do you see as sort of the next big
So,
launch?
so we've the NBA loves it. In fact, we've gotten awards. We were at Leaders Conference in London just a couple of months ago, and we received the Best in Sports Technology Award. Sports Business Journal recognized us as having the best new sports technology. The NBA recognized us for an award along those same lines. And so it's gotten quite a bit of recognition. Now, as we move forward, ESPN and TNT used it last year in analyzing games. So they had their halftime analyst pick apart a play that happened during the game using the Court Vision product. And so we're starting to tease it out there to fans nationally. In addition to that, leagues like soccer is starting to show some interest in adopting the platform as well. So we're starting to gain some traction. The other important piece of it for us is now how do we monetize it outside just the sponsor relationships and the sponsor integrations? How do we really monetize it? Is it a fee-based service? So we're in the midst of figuring that part out and taking it to the next level.
Excellent. Felix, why don't I pass the mic to you?
Sure.
And back to what we had talked about, just give me your flagship and think about this forward-looking. What do you see next as being the big sponsor integration that you're working on that's going to be a home run, and or what you just recently conducted as a big successful sponsorship? Like you're just walking in a room with people that are not esports folks, right?
Right.
What's that big sponsorship or other integration that you
Yeah.
think is coming next?
I mean, to me, it's about continuity. I think it's about, I think we see the success in people that, start by dabbling in esports and then really create long-term plans. I mean, overall, to me, one of our clients that I'm most excited about working in, and the clients I'm not mentioning here, I am excited about you too. But we work for Konami, so the Japanese video game maker, and for them, they're starting to look to us for more solutions on the outside that integrate some of their games that were more non-competitive game into becoming more of an esports with a competitive landscape. So that for us is always exciting because I like the fact that it's kind of in between gaming and esports. Obviously, we say gaming and esports, but they're completely different things. And for me, I'm very happy to work on this. And overall, for the other clients, it's for us media guys. I mean, creating year-long strategies is always where the value and the best allocation of capital and returns is going to be. Right. We're going to put a little bit of thing in League of Legends, put a little bit in influencers, put a little bit here and there, and create the whole package. To me, when we work on clients like this, that's where always I'm most excited, and I'm happy we're playing a part in bringing some clients and companies that are outside of esports, making them understand the value, and then moving them from one-off collaborations to year-long planning of their media within esports. So overall, that's what I'm most excited about. And I think most media and marketing guys would say this, but it's something I like.
So I'm going to give my last question. This is a real doozy for you, Steve. But like we talked about, Scott over here talked a little bit about, and this is no disrespect to Second Spectrum. What they're doing is really hard because you're processing the data and creating the graphics and then burning the stream and then getting the low latency. So you don't have to be super specific on this, but I do want to tee it up as a question. So there's probably a lot of people out there that are just not quite sure how to get from here to there on the low latency discussion. And this is your opportunity. Like, what's that timeline that you see on this? What's that next step, right? If you were in the room right in front of, either Spectrum or maybe Twitter, right? What would be that thing that you would say to them in that moment to say, look, this is the plan. This is what Mux would do for you. It's a 12-month, it's an 18-month, it's a 24-month. We need to hammer, the way you're doing this encoding, the way you're doing that. Do you have any high-level elevator pitch I realize this is a really tough thing to put you on the spot, but like that high-level elevator pitch to Twitter, that is what they need to do in order to bring that latency into synchronicity with the broadcast.
Right.
This is the toughest question I've ever asked. But just give me a landscape, right? Like I'm a CEO.
Yeah.
Should I try this again this year, or should I wait next year? Should I go with the Apple approach, or should I go with the Dash approach?
I'm excited about this today. I think a lot of people are excited about this interactivity today. So I think people should be going after it today, like at the early stages. And like, yes, the technology is not 100% there. Today, you might have to cobble some things together. You're not fully working with the standards-based solution. You're pulling in some proprietary technology in there. But it's there. Sometimes it's expensive. Sometimes it's middle ground. In, let's say, a year from now, I expect more standards around this, more open source projects that kind of tie it all together. So a year from now, I'm really excited for the opportunity to do this more efficiently, lower latency, and like interoperability. So players working with backends like across the stack. But I don't think that should stop you
look,
today.
So I
Yeah.
think you did great with that, but
Okay.
then I'll also give you another, like a follow-up to your perspective, because you and I have been in this business for a long time. Low latency came up. Maybe, I mean, we've been watching it a little longer, but like 2 years ago, I would say, there was very little discussion. Within like 8 months or 10 months, you had CMAF and pretty much every vendor at IBC doing below 6 seconds. And so, right, I mean, I think you can confirm for me that, of how quickly that is evolving. And so we might, in a year from now, be at a place where 1 or 2 seconds of latency is pretty easy to do.
Yeah, maybe not easy. There's still like fundamental technology issues there of getting down to 2 seconds using HTTP essentially, because the mechanisms there, like I think even Apple has had to back off some of its claims of how low it's going to be able to get with this low latency mechanism. So 2, I think, is the best that we're going to get to honestly. And I think when it really becomes a choice then between how much rebuffering you're comfortable with, because that idea of reaching low latency, you're essentially sacrificing the buffer in the player to get there, which is inherently introducing more rebuffering. So that's something you got to consider.
Which is the number one problem. And
Right.
People have no tolerance for it, at least in this early stage of streaming. There's no
Is anyone
tolerance.
talking about an active synchronization signal allowing or enabling like a TiVo integration where you could sync a second screen experience to the visual feed you're getting from a broadcast, a traditional?
There's always already companies doing that.
I mean, I can do it by hand, right?
Well, just look at Net Insight. There's
Right.
a company that I know very well, and they do that broadcasting across different devices, and they synchronize the signal. I mean, it's just a time synchronization in the network. But
Right. So,
They-
betting aside, if you're happy with a 6-second or 10-second delay, and you want that concurrent experience of you being able to like raise up one device and match it against the sprint.
Yeah, there's a difference between low latency and synchronizing the streams. And if you're only concerned with synchronizing, that's a different
One is a
technical
player
problem.
experience happiness indicator, and the other is like, do we want to make a secondary economy like betting or other investment in it? And yeah, I mean, in gaming, video gaming as well as in the real world, that intra-moment betting speculation, that impulse betting speculation, is crucial.
I think it's a good point. And by the way, at IBC, it was all about low latency, and I specifically said that's not the right. It should be synchronized. It's a slightly different problem set, although quite related. And I do think that it's been a little bit, but I think people will get all on board with that. Thank you, guys. I want to give a big hand to the panelists. Yeah? Thank you, guys.